I want to ask you this. Where do most people get it wrong when they are trying to establish their own needs first in a relationship?
Welcome to the Kickass Couples Podcast. This is the place where we help committed couples who want to level up their marriage experience newfound clarity, hope, and confidence. We're Matthew and Kim, co-hosts and husband and wife.
In 26 years together, we've seen a lot and never thought it could be as good as it is right now. We're here to help you successfully navigate the messy, dirty, and wonderful world of marriage.
We believe all couples deserve and are capable of experiencing an extraordinary and fulfilling marriage. And each week, we're bringing you life lessons from real-life successful couples to help you grow and strengthen your relationship.
And now, back to the show.
Are you tired of feeling like you're running on empty? Do you feel like you're constantly giving to others without taking time to nourish yourself? It's time to prioritize self-care and fill your own cup first so that you can show up fully in your relationship. Join us as we explore the benefits of prioritizing self-care in your relationship. We'll dive into practical strategies for incorporating self-care into your daily routine and explore how taking care of yourself can ultimately lead to a deeper and more fulfilling connection with your partner. Denny Locascio is the co-founder and co-owner of Impact Fitness. He's a strength and conditioning coach from St. Petersburg, Florida. He received his BS in exercise science from USF and worked as a trainer and coach at the USF Rec Center. Denny's clientele include NFL and MLB All-Stars, collegiate and high school All-Americans, and Olympic medalists. He specializes in overall football development, corporate wellness, and mobility training. Jenny Swisher is a certified personal trainer and nutritionist. She's the creator of the women's program Sync, How to Fuel and Train with Your Hormone Cycle digital course. She specializes in helping women balance fitness and nutrition with their hormone cycles for optimal energy, leading a team of over 500 health coaches. Two stellar professionals that will help you cover the spiritual, physical, and mindset strategies to keep yourself at your best for you and your partner. Welcome back, everybody, to the Kickass Couples Podcast. We are focusing a special episode today on self-care. I think gone are the days of when people say it's not necessary, it's not important. It is critical, but so many people get it wrong, Kim, and wonder, what do I do to take care of myself without being selfish? How do I do it? How do I approach it? So we've got two incredible panelists with us today. We have Jenny Swisher and Denny Locascio joining us to dive in and share some nuggets and pearls about what people can do to really establish this for themselves so they can be most effective in their own relationship. So welcome, Jenny and Denny.
Awesome. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Our pleasure. Glad to have. These are both alumni, too, of the Kickass Couples Podcast. So they're on a second tour because they slayed it so much the first time.
That's right.
They're coming back to give us some more goodness. Denny was actually, he and his wife Amber were one of the first couples we interviewed, 118, 120, gosh,
I know, episodes ago.
over that many hundreds of episodes. He's a grizzled veteran. But Jenny had the benefit of us knowing a little bit more of what we're doing when we got to interview her and her husband and learn to know about what she's doing. But we are ever evolving, guys. We're trainable. We're teachable. You guys are both trainers and coaches and teachers. So we are going to be open and want to learn today. And Kim's going to kind of share a quote about self-care and then dive right in with some questions.
Yeah, this is a great quote that we found by Rupi Kaur. And it says, how you love yourself is how you teach others to love you. So I love that and wanted to start out by asking each of you, how do you each love yourselves? Jenny, maybe you want to go first. How do you love yourself? How do you care for yourself?
Yeah, well, I think it really starts with your inner voice. I like to call it your narrative. Like, how are you talking to yourself about yourself? And I talk about this a lot when it comes to women's health, because as women, a lot of us are mothers. And we have children watching us, right? So how we speak to ourselves translates not only to our own inner dialogue, but also to our children. Our children see what we're saying about ourselves. So for me, self-care really is about more than just your body and your physique and how you feel about your physical body, but it's also just about how you feel about your energy. I measure everything in energy. And so for me, it's constantly gauging that energy and then understanding what it might take to refill your energy bucket. That's self-care.
And Denny, how would you say you love yourself? How do you care for you?
Yeah, I think Jenny's spot on. I think we have very similar thought processes. And it's easy for me to say the physical aspect because that's the profession I'm in. That's the world I live in, is taking care of yourself physically. But I really believe what she said, it starts before all that. It's the self-talk. It's the words you read, the words you speak to other people, the words you allow people to speak to you. All that starts before you get to anything physical. So, biggest thing in my world, just how I talk to myself, things I read, things I'm watching, the world I'm around.
That's great. So you're talking about digesting, Denny. I love that, about, what you take in, right? What you think, what you focus on, kind of what you become. And Jenny was talking to that about energy too. And so I'd love to hear from each of you. And Denny, maybe you'd start. What is one of your personal, like, non-negotiable self-care? Like, come heck or high water, I've got to do this to take care of myself.
For me, it starts first thing in the morning and just having the quiet morning time, my prayer time, my meditation time. Like that kind of, for me, starts the rest of the day. Yeah, I feel like I got to get a workout in. I feel like I got to do something active. But I think even before that, I got to start like with a fresh slate, a fresh mindset, and just clearing everything for the day.
And so tell me how do you feel when you do it versus when you don't? What's the difference it makes in your day when you do or don't do that?
I feel like it starts the day with a focus and not being so rushed into the day before the day gets ahead of you. And especially as a parent, as a working professional, as that day gets going, it only gets busier or more things come at you. There's more things to do. People are always trying to take your time. So if you spend a few minutes to your own time focusing on what you need to focus on, or your prayers and moments of gratitude, those things kind of set you up for the rest of the day.
Right.
Yeah. So really grounding yourself, setting a foundation and an intention for yourself for the day.
How about you, Jenny? What's one of your non-negotiable, like, hey, I got to do this to take care of myself?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm not a morning person, so I don't do it first thing in the morning, but I do set my day the night before. So before I go to bed at night, I have a gratitude journal that I keep by my bedside. Even if it's just 5 minutes before I turn out the light, I write down what are things that happened today that I'm grateful for. I used to do the basics of like, what am I grateful for? And I would write down general things like my family and my health. And I realized I really needed to evoke more emotion from myself in order to really feel and almost relive those moments that I'm grateful for. So now I do my gratitude journal at night and I just say, what are 3 things that happened today that I want to just sit and remember and relive that moment while it's still fresh? And for me, going to bed that way, just like it wakes me up in a good mood, it puts me in a good vibe for the day. So even though it would be easy for me to say, because I'm in the health and fitness space, it would be easy for me to say, movement is my number one priority. As we record this, I'm in the middle of a month-long flare-up of vertigo. So workouts have not been my priority. It's just been, if I can walk today, I walk today, right? But it's movement is not as important as mindset to me. Like to me, it's where is your mindset? How are you living? Are you living in gratitude? Are you living in a positive vibe, so to speak? And that really can set you up for better exercise, better relationships, better everything.
And I want to, you guys both said, and I agree with you, want to echo, you said gratitude. Mm-hmm. And I think it's grateful for what you have and what you've experienced. And then I know both of you probably do this, and Kim and I kind of like, how can we out-gratitude each other for each other? But expressing the gratitude to your partner. I think, when you have gratitude in your mind for your partner and you don't say it, you don't share it, you don't put it out there, it's almost like having money you never spend. Right? What's the use of having a big stack of cash in the corner if it never does anything for you? And gratitude, you guys both hit that. I think it makes you aware of the goodness you have, but it also, when you're talking about gratitude for your partner, right, it makes them know you're recognizing and seeing their value. And I love what you guys both shared on that. Are you tired of feeling like you're living with a roommate instead of a lover? Do you miss the days when you were completely into each other, intellectually, emotionally, and physically? The truth is, many couples are struggling behind closed doors. Putting on a brave face for the rest of the world is exhausting. If you want to get back your joy, return to thriving, and take pleasure in your marriage, then Kickass Couples Coaching and Matthew P. Hoffman are here to help. Join us alone or with your partner and start taking steps towards overcoming the pain-filled obstacles and improving your relationship right now. For a limited time, we're offering a free relationship assessment call. Go to MatthewPHoffman.com/coaching to book your free call now so you can start making real changes in your most important relationship today.
Yeah, mind first and then body and spirit comes next, is what I hear both of you saying. And I think people kind of get that twisted up a little bit and are not focusing on the mind part first. But I want to ask you this: where do most people get it wrong when they are trying to establish their own needs first in a relationship? Where do they go wrong?
I think it's easy, at least in my family, is, because I have two young kids, is to get caught up in trying to take care of the kids, especially for my wife. She's the most selfless person I know. And it's easy for her to get caught up in trying to take care of everybody else before taking care of herself. Where I'm a little bit better at, usually put myself first or integrating the whole family with us. So sometimes it's just, sometimes resetting those priorities, or, hey, what do I need to get done today? And planning ahead too. I think that sometimes too is like your schedule gets ahead of you, or events get ahead of you. Trying to get all this check off box stuff done, you put yourself last.
I've fallen into that trap and lived there for quite a long time. Kids, family first, everything else had to check those boxes. And I think that's not a good place to be, honestly. How about for you, Jenny?
Yeah, I would say the same. I mean, I work dominantly with women. And so I see this often where I like to say women like to wear all the hats. We're caretaking, and we're wife, and we're sometimes caretaking for our parents, and we're playing all these different roles. Sometimes there's career involved and other things. And so it's very easy to say, I'm just too busy for my own self-care. Everything else comes first. We want to pour into everyone else before we want to pour into ourselves. But I find that I'm constantly reminding women that it doesn't mean that your whole day has to shift to be around you. It just means that you need those pockets of time that are focused on you so that you can give your very best. I always say, I want women to reach their maximum energy so that they can be their best for those that they love. And I think sometimes we get it backwards because we do, like Denny said, we get caught up in the day-to-day, we get caught up in the schedules, we get caught up in making sure our kids are taken care of and our spouse is taken care of. And sometimes it can just it just happens, and it's not intentional, right? Which is why self-care is intentional.
Yeah. What's a first step that women can take to get in that space?
Well, I think first they have to get rid of the guilt. I think that's the very first step, is realizing that it's not selfish for them to want to care for themselves. I know a lot of women. I work in the home exercise space, so home fitness programs and that sort of thing. And on one hand, yes, it's convenient because women can just walk to their basement or their living room and they can do a workout there. But even still, some women struggle with that. They struggle with stepping away from their kids or putting their kids in front of an iPad or something so that they can take that 30 minutes for themselves. And so for me, it's saying and reminding them that it's okay to take those 30 minutes and you can shed that guilt, knowing that I know for me, those workouts are my sanity, right? Like that gives me 30 minutes to just get out any aggression, like to sweat and to just feel better and to get those endorphins running. And I know my kids see it in me. I'm a better person after I do that. I'm more, I can tolerate more. I'm more patient. And so I think the first step has to be getting rid of the guilt so that you can step into that, that just acknowledgement that you are worthy of that time for yourself.
Yeah. And I think once you get past that mental aspect of it, I think the next step is establishing habits or even stopping habits and kind of evaluating what you've been doing with your schedule, your family time, all these times. And now saying, hey, let's establish some new habits. The great book Atomic Habits kind of goes over this, is that, hey, maybe you just need to start for 1 minute doing something. And then you've established that habit and move it up to 2 minutes. and not trying to overwhelm yourself and create a whole hour workout, right? Every day. And it's just overwhelming. But could you do 5 minutes? Or start off with some basic wins in your schedule and plan for it, plan ahead, look at the next day ahead, and have that established and have that help you out to do some self-care.
So I hear one of the things that, Kim talked about, not putting herself first and not being willing to do it. And I think we even had there was some resentment that we had to work through, because my exercise was important to me, just like my prayer time, meditation time. And I would schedule the workouts, and I don't care how busy I was, I would do them. And some resentment build up between us, where she would say, hey, how can, why are you taking the time to do that, but you're not doing X, Y, or Z, right? Or I don't have the time to do it. Why is it fair for you to do it? So how do we in a relationship, or some of the clients that you've had, how can somebody work through that challenge of resentment where one individual says, I don't have the time, right? Or you do, or you're being selfish because you're doing these things for you, but I can't do them for me. So it's one thing when you're just you in your tunnel, right? Hey, it's just me. But have you guys come up against that in your practice and working with people where it's not just their own ability and, as Denny was saying, a habit, but when we introduce the dynamic of a relationship, how can somebody, you guys have any thoughts on how somebody can work through that and still maintain the relationship, but get that self-care?
What has tended to work best in our family and our relationship is kind of integrating. So maybe it's you all get to work out together, or if the kids are going to their jiu-jitsu, that's my time to do jiu-jitsu. Or if we're all going to go for a hike, for a walk, we just do it together as a family. So sometimes instead of doing two separate things, what if we can combine them and do them at the same time? So now you're doing a couple things at once. Maybe you can have your walk or your ruck at night, and that's your time with your wife to talk over these things. So maybe sometimes having to work together to integrate and not having to do two different things at two different times.
That makes sense. How about you, Jenny? What are your thoughts about
Yeah. So for about 6 years, my husband and I owned a fitness studio, and I had male and female clients. And I saw this all the time, where women especially would come in and, they want to sign up for the program. They want to come in and work out, and they're maybe used to exercise, or they're interested in exercise. And I see it more often on this side of the coin, but I know it goes both ways, where they can't get their spouse on board, right? Like they want their spouse to come to the gym with them, or they want them to participate, but for whatever reason, they're not interested in it, or there's this sense of resentment. And again, I've seen it go both ways. I had a male client who used to say, my wife doesn't want me coming here because she thinks I'm going to get hot. He used to say that. And he was a funny guy, but it's true. I mean, you see this dynamic happen often. And so people ask me this, they'll say, well, how can I get my spouse on board? Like, how can I get them more interested in a healthy lifestyle? I'm really trying to make efforts, and I feel like they're sabotaging my efforts. I hear that frequently. And I think my best advice there, or I guess what I would say to that is, open communication with your spouse has to be number one. So even in my own personal story, when I first started doing home workouts 13 years ago, my husband was very much like, you do that. That's not for me. That's weird. I'm a runner. I'll run when I feel like it. Like, no, thank you. And so for me, it was okay. Like, I'm not going to let this disrupt our relationship. I'm going to just bring him in it with me. I'm going to tell him about it. Right. So I would tell him, I would go downstairs and I would try to do the pull-ups, and I would fail miserably. And then we would share over dinner, we'd be talking about things. I'd be like, you should see me do these pull-ups. Like, it's sad, like I would share with him like pieces of the workout, or I came off my knees today to do push-ups or whatever. And slowly he was just like, he saw me transforming. He saw my body transforming. He saw how interested I was in the workouts. He saw me change and just become happier. And so slowly he's like, I'll start doing them with you. So we started getting up together in the morning, and he started doing them with me. But I was never putting him in a position to feel guilty, or, I was never saying like, well, you need to do this with me. I wasn't trying to like preach to him. It was just, well, this is something that I want to do, and it's important to me. And I'm going to continue to communicate how important it is to me and how I'm feeling as I do it. And that process brought us through a journey of really double transformation, because he ended up saying, you know what, this is kind of cool. Maybe I want to do it too. So I don't think it's ever, a good idea to allow that resentment in. I think that's where we have to stop and say, wait a minute, like, why is this feeling happening? And how can we prevent that from happening? How can we be more clear in our communication?
Yeah.
Jenny, I got a great similar story. Is that when we had our oldest, our daughter, my wife wanted to do meditation, and I was like, I'm not all into the meditation, the Headspace app, and I was like, that's not for me. And then she had done it numerous times, playing out loud right there in the living room. And after being around it enough times, like, well, sounds pretty interesting. The guy's voice is pretty soothing. I was like, maybe I'll sit down and do a lesson with you. And to this day, 6 years later, I'm hooked. And so it's like a thing now that we'll do the Headspace meditation together. By osmosis, it just finally absorbed into me.
I love it because I hear you both saying that healthy communication, and then you each modeled something, or in your stories, somebody modeled something, right? And then it was just a natural thing that your spouses sort of came along. So I love hearing that, you actually did it and continued to do it, and they were attracted to it and came on board.
Yeah, and Jenny, I love what you said because I think it's so important. You said, I didn't make him do it, but I shared it with him and let him know how important it was to me. And obviously, he loves you and is committed to you. So if it's important to you, his desire to support you or cheer you on, not that he was doing it, led to his involvement because he knew it was important to you. So I think we can have different habits or we can share them, but the idea that we're supporting our spouse in the journey that's best for them, we want what's best for our partner, our best friend, right? We want them to get what they need. And if it's different than ours, we can understand and come along for the journey. And Denny, your story is, Kim and I, we have great stories as well in our relationship where we've influenced each other by the practices that we are doing to take care of ourselves and our families.
Yeah. So are there any current or common practices that people sort of wrongly classify as self-care? So sort of think of it as like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Maybe they're actually, saying that I need this self-care, but really it's maybe not healthy for the relationship. Can you think of any of those instances?
I can speak to that. I literally just recorded a podcast myself for this topic of, are my workouts counterproductive? And again, I speak to women, and I've found that in working with women for the last dozen years, I work with fitness enthusiasts. I work with women who they're into exercise. And I will tell you that can be, it can become a problem, especially if we become obsessive about our workouts. I see this happening every day where women will, again, I work in the home fitness space. So they're following a calendar, right? They're following a 60-day program or a 90-day program, and they become so obsessive about that program that it can be counterproductive to their health. It can definitely, start to stress their adrenals and their hormones and everything else. But it's also counterproductive because now all of a sudden it's become this obsessive thing that really maybe your spouse can't even understand because you're so far into it. Does that make sense? So exercise is great. I would say exercise is great in moderation. Clean eating is great in moderation. We also need to live our lives too, right? So when we start to become too obsessive about those things, I've seen that also disrupt relationships and women in general, just as people.
Yeah, that's a great example, Jenny. I could see that happening. For me too, it's very similar to the food. Like I'm probably 80% strict on my nutrition. Like in the morning, daytime, I can make my own meals. We're good. But when it comes time to the family time at night, I don't want to make or have someone make two different meals, right? So it's like I'm trying to do the strict meal. The family's not having the strict meal. So it's like I can be flexible, or any of us can be flexible with what we're eating. Also see it too in like how much time you're spending outside of your family. Maybe it's hanging out with your friends or going out. Sometimes alcohol even itself is detrimental to your family time. So sometimes taking a look at those things too.
Yeah.
And
There are some activities, and I'll just use golf as an example. It takes up a lot of time. And, we have a lot of friends who love it. They're obsessed with it, but it takes a lot of time away from the family. So I think we have to look at those things and how they actually impact a relationship.
Yeah, no doubt. So you guys talked a little bit about communication, Jenny, and I want to swing back to that. How do you all, or what, for our listeners out there who maybe have what's important to them and they're not sure, how can we normalize that communication? Whether it's, this is what I need, or how can I support you? It seems that you know, communication is the glue that holds us together no matter what, whether the times are great or they're bad. But how how can you gave a great example, Jenny, of, I said, you know, you brought your husband in. So, and Denny, I kind of want to ask, you know, Denny, maybe you'll go first on this one. How have you communicated or worked with your clients to normalize their self-care so that their spouse is part of it as opposed to it's separate together? Because when you talked about shared activities, but, you know, share from your experience with your clients or with your wife about the communication and the self-care, and so it's open and sharing as opposed to closed and independent. Are you struggling to maintain the emotional and physical intimacy you once shared? Do you feel like you're spending more energy finding fault and tearing your partner down instead of magnifying their good and building them up? Don't worry, you're not alone. Many couples are struggling behind a forced smile and an inauthentic happiness. You feel drained, unheard, and more often than not, unappreciated. The good news is it's not too late to rekindle the flame and strengthen your bond. I'm offering a free relationship assessment call to help you take the first step towards revitalizing your relationship and reaching your own relationship nirvana. Whether you come alone or with your partner, I'm here to help you create the space for a more fulfilling and satisfying relationship. Don't wait any longer. Make the changes you need to thrive. Book your free call today at matthewphoffman.com/coaching. And let's get started on your journey to a kick-ass relationship.
Yeah, maybe if I could take it one step backwards, and sometimes it's knowing yourself first, like knowing where on that barometer you sit on what you need for self-care. Like for me personally, I need really hard, like physical and mental challenges to keep me level. And so that may require a 24-hour weekend challenge away, some type of physical thing where I'm doing this crazy workouts, right? And that keeps me level, keeps me calm, it kind of resets me. But I'm also lucky in the fact that my wife can also recover and able to support that. So I think it's two, knowing yourself and what your needs are, and also having the communication, knowing, can your spouse handle that? Or what will it take to allow that to happen, and talking to each other through that. So maybe that's where that communication comes in, and knowing each other and saying, I need this for this to happen, for us to have a working relationship. What do we need to do to get there? What do I need to do to support you? What do you need? And having maybe those conversations and seeing how you can help the other person. What do they need? What do you need? Can they help you and support that? Or what do we need to do to allow that to be in support system?
And Denny, I agree with you. I think will you share the example? I know that you've had the Misagi, right? Am I saying it right? Misogi. Sorry, Misogi. So, how did you bring that up with your wife, and what did that conversation look like? So just share with us how you walked through that process so that you communicated to her what you needed, she supplied it to you, and how did you guys thrive through that as opposed to this horrible thing that we had to just get through?
So by definition, misogi is a Japanese term of doing something physically challenging once a year that's so impactful that it almost affects the rest of your life. And usually there's like a 50-50 chance of you actually finishing this event. And so what we do as a family is in January, the end of December, we go through our family goals. Usually it's individuals and family goals. And we sit down with the whole family, even our kids do it, and saying, what would be your goals for the year? What are the family goals? What do we want to accomplish? And so I look a year ahead and plan out what I would like that misogi to be. So for next year, it's going to Normandy for the 80th anniversary of D-Day and doing a series of events on the beaches of Normandy. So we're already, a year ahead in 2024, knowing what that is, what that's going to look like, and start that planning process and saying, what does the family need to do for this to happen? Maybe it's to save financially. Maybe it's to make decision on if the kids are going or not going. Is it too stressful for them to go or not go? What will be the support look like out there? So I'm starting to look at those things maybe ahead of time. At least that's how it works in our family. It's like, Amber, what do you want to do next year? What are your goals? What can I support you on? And looking over those things and just talking over them. And then how do we get there? How do we make that support system around those ideas happen?
So I hear you say a lot of planning, a lot of communication. I love that. Jenny, you have anything to add on that about kind of communicating those needs and desires so that it's collaborative as opposed to declaration, like I am doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm thinking a little deeper about it too. I mean, we do this as well, like the goal setting and communicating on goals and stuff every year. Usually on New Year's Eve, it's like a date night for us. So, but it's interesting because I think I'm thinking about like the real life examples of what I've experienced when one of, a couple says, I'm struggling with my spouse not understanding where I am. And I think this might sound a little weird, but like I really think that sometimes I find that if there's not open communication about this, there's probably not open communication about a lot of other things as well. And so one of my biggest, especially as I'm talking to fellow women, is I will say, what's your intimacy like? Like, are you able to be intimate with your spouse? Because if you are, I want you to use those intimate moments to really open up about what you're really feeling. And it goes beyond just exercise and nutrition and those kinds of things, right? But I know for me, I can speak to myself, like when something is really either bothering me or there's something that I'm really passionate about that, that I want him to feel and be part of. If he's very like, if he's putting up a wall and he's not interested in hearing that, I know that our intimacy needs some work. I know that we may need more time together on a date night, or he's a physical touch guy, so he may be more interested in like the snuggling and the cuddling, right? So for me, it's like, how can we build and really bring our intimacy up so that communication opens up even further? Like, I feel like it's all interweaved, right? You guys have your,
Sure.
Are we really connecting with each other? Are we really
Yeah.
being, close and vulnerable with each other?
right? Because saying something and the other person listening is not quite the same as true connection, right? And so to me, it's all interwoven, probably with all 14 of your pillars, as far as how is this all working together. But I usually see that if there is, if there's a hiccup in that communication about something as simple as starting an exercise regimen, it probably goes deeper than that.
Sure. Well, that kind of segues into my next question, which is we believe that shared experiences and doing things together really do establish those closer bonds. Could you, Jenny, give our listeners some examples of things that they can do to do self-care together so that they can build those bonds?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's different for every couple. The one thing I will say is, I never enjoyed working out with my spouse because he was a former Division I athlete and I was definitely not. And so, when we would do workouts together, I always was like, you stand in front, I stand in back. Like there was always, I was like, But also we like different things. He likes to go running. I like to lift weights, so it felt like I was dragging him along to bring him along with me sometimes, although we do still do that. Occasionally we do still work out together. But it's also important to just acknowledge and appreciate the other's interests. If your significant other is into mountain biking, like cool, like that's your thing, right? Or if you're into yoga, and let that be your thing. But I think, it's interesting because sometimes on vacation, when we're in small spaces, right? Like we rent a condo or something on vacation, we will both work out in the same room doing two totally different things at the same time. And so the first thing I want your listeners to understand is you don't have to be doing this like all in together every day, doing the same thing every day. It can look different. It can look, according to your own individual goals and your own individual interests. So that would be my first tip. Yeah.
How about for you, Denny?
I'm lucky in the fact that usually my wife and I are like the same things when it comes to physical activity. Like we both making stories of going hiking, finding a trail, some type of mountain to climb, and the family, like the whole family, our family does best when we're all outdoors. So maybe it's kayaking, anything like that. We do. Everyone's has the best. Even the kids have the best attitudes. Everything's really good. So we're lucky in the fact of that. But still, there are little things like my wife loves concerts. So finding out what your significant other's into, and like Jenny said, supporting them in that, meeting them over there on their side of that, of that chart, and finding out what they're into and just supporting them in that, and then getting involved in it, not just from the sidelines, but going into the game.
Sure. Yeah, really finding those experiences that maybe you don't love so much, but you know that your spouse does, and you go along with it, and you end up probably having a great time. I know you've done concerts that I love for musicians that I love, and afterwards have gone, oh wow, that was a lot better than I thought it would be.
Yeah, not always self-serving. So, one of my least favorite words in the English language is the word busy, busy. It is a four-letter word. And because it doesn't give you any indication, right, of what's happening. But we all, based on what our lives throw at us, whether it's family, whether it's work, whether it's family of origin, we get stressed, we get burned out, and we feel, oh my gosh, I just want to get out of this and change it up. I'd love to hear from each of you, Jenny, and maybe Jenny, you can go first, is with your clients or with yourself. If someone says, I am stressed, anxiety's high, and I'm burned out, what's something somebody can do for a personal reset? Like, how do you get out of the pit when you're just feeling overwhelmed and just things aren't going well? What would your advice be to someone that wants to get out of that?
Oh gosh. Okay. So my token phrase that I say all the time is health is individual. So what might work for me to get out of that rut might be different from what might work for you. And so I'll start with that. But I will say that one piece of advice that I have given out on my podcast and in my course is that we as humans have become so disconnected with nature that we are literally, most of us, sedentary. We're stuck inside walls and we're not outdoors enough. And so as a result of that, our circadian rhythm gets disrupted, which can then affect hormones and sleep. And of course, all that affects our energy. And so something as simple as taking 10 to 20 minutes out of your day to just be outside. It can be a picnic in the park. It can be a walk. It can be a hike. It can be a run. It can be whatever you want it to be. But I find so many people come back to me and they say, I had no idea how much of a difference that would make for me. There is something out there in the health space called earthing or grounding, which is walking outside, taking off your shoes and socks and literally just walking in the barefoot in the grass, looking up toward the sun. And it might sound frou-frou and weird, but I really do find that when people are feeling really overwhelmed, really stressed, they don't know how to get out of their own head, stepping outside into nature can be a great first step.
Great example. Yeah. How about for you, Denny? What would you
Yeah,
tell
for me,
someone that's
it's
stressed?
interesting. My wife and I heard a podcast interview with Brene Brown. It's a couple years ago now, and something that her and her husband, they use as a strategy, and we've actually since used it, and it's worked out great for us, is that it's usually for us, since we're in the stage of younger kids, it's usually younger kids, our kids, end of the night, stressing us out. And what ends up happening is, like Brene said, like, hey, I got 1% of energy left over. And it's usually like your spouse, my wife would be like, listen, I can cover that other percent, or I got 70%, I can cover the rest of the 30% you need help with. So it's us usually at the end of the night. If one of us is tapped low on on what's left of our stress level, it's usually the other person picking back up. And it's very rare, if not ever, that both of us have been tapped out at zero. So it's one of us help picking up the other one, but it's also letting us know that, listen, I got about 20% left of the stress meter, or else I'm going to go over the top. And the other person comes in, covers for us at that time, and that spouse can just do what you need to do to get that mental recovery. That maybe it's go outside in the sauna, or go for a walk, or go for a workout, whatever it is that you need to do to get back to level. But that's worked out really well for us. You're just kind of telling the other person where you're at on that barometer.
Sure. I love that. It's communication, right? It's saying, I'm tapped out, or I'm going to tap out, or I'm going to lose it if I don't get some help. Because, we're not mind readers. We can't look at our partner, and sometimes we get physical cues. Ooh, she looks really stressed. I need to get in there and figure out what's going on. But sometimes we're caught up in our own story and we don't hear or see that. But having your partner communicate and say, let me wave the flag, white flag, I need help, or I need, you got to get in here with me. And I think that we often don't do that a lot. So, and it also comes back when we do that, we're giving a deeper emotional connection to our partner that creates what Jenny was talking about earlier, is it cranks up our intimacy because we're being vulnerable and we're giving something for them to have an opportunity to help us, which brings us together. So I love what you each shared there.
I think all that leads to good romance.
It does. It does.
So, how would you, Jenny, say that self care has evolved from when you were a child to now? How have you seen it evolve?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say, I think back to my childhood and my parents. I think there's a lot of similarities on things that have stayed the same, but there are also some differences as well. I mean, my mom was primary caretaker for our household. My dad worked full time all the time. He was driving trucks. And I can remember my mom would rarely ask for time alone. Like she was always with us all the time. She cooked all the meals, did all the laundry, took us all the places, was at every sporting event, every single thing. She never really took a break. And I can say this with love that I could see that in her. And I really think that if knowing what I know now as a mother and as someone who has been in similar shoes, I wish she had taken more time for her own hobbies, for her own mental reset, because she would really sort of boil to a point where all of a sudden she would boil over, right? And so I've seen that happen. And I think nowadays, it's interesting because she and I were just having a conversation the other day. We were talking about this mutual family friend. And this mutual family friend has a daughter my age, and she has 4 kids. And she said to me, can you believe that so-and-so went out for the weekend? She went for the weekend to a hotel and stayed in the hotel for the weekend while her husband took care of the kids for the weekend. She's like, can you believe that? And she like went on this whole rant. And I was like, I'm going to slow for Amy here because it's the best thing I have ever heard. And I wish that that's a great idea. Like, that's what I'm asking for Mother's Day, So I think it's evolved in that way. I know my mom's generation definitely, I mean, I don't want to speak to all of them. It's not a stereotype, but my mom in particular was very much not someone to take her own time for herself. I never saw her exercising. I never saw her really even doing a lot outside the home. And I know for me and a lot of my generation, it's the opposite. It's, daddy is fully capable of taking care of the kids right now while I take a break or go to a hotel for the night or whatever the case is. So that's one major difference that I see. But I also just think that we have so much more available to us now than we did before, as far as, we have the internet at our fingertips. So you can pull up your Headspace app and do a meditation and kind of reset your mind. Whereas maybe 30, 40 years ago, that wasn't an option, right? Or you can do a home workout a lot easier than you could back in the day. So I think those are both things at play.
Yeah. Denny, how have you seen self-care evolve in your own family?
Yeah, Jane, that was well said. For me, just like as a male perspective, it's not that we haven't had feelings, just now it's becoming more common for us. It'd be okay for us to express the feelings. I think it's just old school to hold it all in, just bear the weight, hold it on your shoulders, put your head down and grind it out. And now it's just becoming more mainstream, more okay to express those feelings. Like my wife will say, it's like, it's okay to tell me these things. You can trust me. And just having conversations now about what's going on in your world instead of just bearing it all in, keeping it to yourself. I think we're not there yet, but I think it's that trend. We're all headed in the right direction there.
I would agree with that. And I think it's important. That's actually what brings us closer together, when you can really trust your spouse and open up to your spouse. That builds a very deep bond.
It does. It does. You guys have been great.
I know we could keep going on.
We have more questions. Yeah, we have inquiring minds. We want to know. But you've shared some great stuff with us. Jenny, if people want to get in touch with you, if they want to connect, if they want to learn more about the good work that you're doing, where should they go?
Yeah, you can find everything for me at jennyswisher.com, or I'm Jenny Swisher on my handle for Instagram, Facebook, and all the places. So either way, get in touch with me personally or head to the website, or both.
Great. And how about for you, Denny? If people want to connect with you and get some of the good that you've got going on.
Yeah, the social is probably easiest. Just Strong Dlo, STRONGDLO.
Beautiful.
Thank you both so much. This has been a great conversation, good dialogue, and I think our listeners have gained a lot from this episode.
No doubt. We want to normalize the self-care. It's here. It's not going away. It's not a selfish thing when it's done right. And y'all have given us some great things to think about how we can apply it and do it for ourselves and make it better in our own relationships. So we're grateful. And thank you for your time today.
Yeah. Take care, guys.
We just
Awesome.
want you guys and our listeners to remember that obviously happily ever after does not just happen, but it is on purpose. So thanks for being with us today, guys.
That's all we've got for this episode of the Kickass Couples Podcast. If you like the content of this show, you'll love Matthew's newly released book, Kickass Husband, Winning at Life, Marriage, and Sex. To receive a digital mini book of quotes and images from the book, all you have to do is rate this show and leave a review in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in to listen. Then email us a screenshot of your review at podcast@kickasscouplespodcast.com, and we'll get it over to you right away. Until next time, remember, happily ever after doesn't just happen, it's on purpose.